Okay, so this is a quick emergency late night update for you today. If you're watching this in the morning, I assure you it's still going to be relevant. I know how fast the news cycle is moving, but I assure you there's going to be some points that I mentioned in here that are going to have staying power. Now, we have a very volatile week ahead. We're talking riots, volatility in the markets, and wars, of course. I've had some time to finally process this statement from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on steps to increase force posture, just released about 24 hours ago, where they indicate that they're going to be increasing troops in the Middle East, increasing combat readiness for troops on standby, as well as deploying THAAD anti-ballistic missile defense systems, Patriot missile batteries, more Iron Dome systems, and more warships in the region. They're preparing to go to war with Iran. Now, interestingly, they state that in the first sentence. They say, following detailed discussions with President Biden on recent escalations by Iran and its proxy forces across the Middle Eastern region today, I directed a series of additional steps to strengthen the DoD posture in that region. These steps will bolster regional defense efforts, increase force protection for U.S. sources in the region, and assist in the defense of Israel. Now, this is not about Israel. It's not about Palestine. It's not about Gaza. Unfortunately, as much as I'm a humanitarian and as much as I'm sure many of the people protesting around the world genuinely care about the plight of the Gazan people and the people in the West Bank, unfortunately, the powers on all sides don't. This is just something that's politically instrumental for their own ends. What they do care about is Iran. That's why they say in the first sentence they mention Iran. Remember 9/11. How did we get into the war with Iraq? Well, it was piggybacked and it was a Trojan horse kind of inserted with that whole Afghanistan thing. Weapons of mass destruction. They capitalized on people's anti-Islamic sentiment at the time and fear of terror and all this stuff. And they seized on that opportunity, and that's exactly what they're going to do now. They've realized that, hey, this is our opportunity, even though there is no intelligence, as far as we know, from the U.S. government or any other government that's implicating Iran in the Hamas terrorist attacks, as far as we know. There may come out that there is some loose affiliation or alignment, but as far as I know, and it's a very complicated situation between all of these proxy groups that militias that Iran runs, Hamas in many ways is viewed as an apostate by other groups that Iran is also associated with, okay? And then they have the common enemy of ISIS, of course. So this complicates the situation, but it shows you that the real enemy here is Iraq. Now, Israel has made some very, very stern threats to Iran in the last 24 hours, and you should know that the Iranian Guard Aerospace Force has put the Ballistic Missile Command on high alert. According to Iranian sources, the Iranian Guard Force is set to conduct a major ballistic exercise near Qom. Photos and videos showing Iran moving dozens of ballistic missiles to launch sites. We've been seeing that all week, so I guess we're just going to see how that plays out. But we know Israel has also sent some of its nuclear submarines to sea. It's hypothetical nuclear submarines, and they've also made numerous direct threats to the Iranians and Hezbollah, that if Hezbollah gets into the war, they're going to wipe them off the map. We know that there is a concentration of NATO forces on the island of Cyprus, and you got Russian planes flying around there, reconnaissance planes. You got Turkey's interests in there. You got Russian interests. So this is a powder keg, to say the least. Plus, you got, what, a dozen or so different loosely affiliated groups that are fighting on behalf of the Iranian mullahs, all right? So we know that the end game here is to get into position. Remember, the Iraq war didn't just happen immediately after September 11th. It took a little bit of time to get the wheels turning on things, to put things into place. They're concerned that these missile launches from Yemen are going to continue towards Israel. Some people are saying they weren't directed towards Israel. We're just going to have to assume they were. And the problem is that they have a limited amount of resources there, okay? They're surrounded by a country, Iran, who has thousands of missiles, if not tens of thousands of missiles. So if they wanted to, they could rain all hell and easily overwhelm a lot of these missile defense systems. Then, of course, we have the potential for Israel to get involved directly with Iran, which is what they threatened. Here's what Israel's economic minister, Nir Berkat, the threat that he issued today. he announced that Tel Aviv would launch an attack on Tehran if Hezbollah, okay, which it supports, joins the war. So if Hezbollah gets directly involved in the war, and remember, at least as far as I know, Hezbollah and all of these groups don't care at all about Gaza. They don't care about the Palestinians. It's instrumental for them to politically leverage that, to garner support, to do some atrocity porn and get more supporters and followers and make the U.S. and Israel and NATO's life a living hell. And this is not to say that NATO cares about the plight of the Gazans. The Israelis certainly don't care about the Gazans one bit. So unfortunately, the Gazans are just a playing piece in this, being used by all sides. The only way that this actually materializes into a country being forced to come to the direct support of the Palestinians is if there is a groundswell of support in those countries, a critical mass of support that forces their leaders to take action. And that's something we very well may see when Israel eventually enters Gaza. We know they've been bombing heavily. I think this is one of the most intense nights for bombing ever so far in the war. So the aftermath of this could trigger some pretty insane protests around the world and blowback in all ways, and just religious fighting between Jews and Muslims, and probably the Christians are going to get in there at some point as well. So we know Israel has sent nuclear submarines to sea, and they've said Iran's plan is to attack Israel on all fronts, hence why the United States has clearly stated that escalations by Iran and its proxy forces across the Middle East are going to be the reason, the motive for us moving more of our troops and systems in there. If we find that they intend to target Israel, we will not only retaliate on those fronts, but we will go to the head of the snake that is Iran. Iran's Ayatollahs are not going to sleep peacefully at night. We will make sure they pay a heavy price if they open up the northern front, he said. Iran's Ayatollahs will be wiped off the face of the earth if Hezbollah attacks Israel. Now, Iran has been preparing for this, okay? We've all seen the numerous videos of their very, very large underground military bunkers. And I think that that is just scratching the surface. So even if Israel rained down hell with all of their nuclear weapons, I don't think they're going to take out the Iranians, to be brutally honest. I mean, if they start targeting Iranian cities, then I think I really can't see a situation where they would do that. You know, I just, you know, I mean, because that would receive so much global pushback. The Chinese need Iranian oil, and they've been buying Iranian oil more and more in spite of the sanctions. The Chinese are a very energy, they need to diversify. They can't be wholly dependent on the Russians nor Saudi Arabia. With such a large population, they need that Iranian oil to start flowing into the market. They're sending 6 warships. Now, that's nothing, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But it's a start. It's a show of, if anything, ambiguity. And I'm sure the United States are going to take this as a signal. Of course, they are buying. And, you know, you can make the argument that the ties between Iran, Russia, China are probably, these are not like deep ties. Everybody can be an ally and then turn into an enemy overnight. Okay, and the same thing can happen in Europe, in spite of NATO. You know, there's many countries like Greece and what's the other one? Greece and Turkey, you know, and there's a lot of long-standing issues between many countries, even within these alliances, that could overnight see them fighting with one another. So just because China supports Iran now or in the early stages of a world war doesn't necessarily mean they're going to support them forever. But I do think that they have economic interest to secure there. The Chinese don't want a war in the Middle East because it's going to lead to skyrocketing oil prices, and that's the last thing they need. That's why they've been stockpiling grain, stockpiling all kinds of commodities, oil, you know, gold, all that stuff, because they know that they probably knew that this plan that the United States is now putting into action was bound to happen at some point once again. And now that the diplomats are being evacuated and the American military bases are being bombed on a regular basis, it's a very high likelihood now that this war with Iran will eventually happen. Now, how the protests factor into this yet, I haven't quite figured that out, because there's been an unusual showing of support. And I've mentioned this numerous times, that this is just not something you see in any war. For a population of only 2 million people, to have them command the attention of the entire planet, we're talking every major city has had record-breaking protests. Okay, protests in the hundreds of thousands in some cases for the Palestinians. More people are protesting than there are Gazans in Gaza. And one has to wonder, and I'm not going to get conspiratorial about this because, you know, this could just be where we're at now. You know, people need another cause, and this is a genuine, bona fide cause. You know, I mean, there's a humanitarian crisis there that needs to be addressed. And this generation appears to be shifting in that direction, and that is out of sync with the interests of the deep state, who want to go to war with Israel and who want to go to war with Lebanon, clearly, because now they're beyond level 4 in terms of you got to get out of Lebanon. Okay, so they know that there's a war coming to Lebanon. And today, well, before I talk about this next story, I'll just say that this level of protest is creating all kinds of problems. Not because so much the protests, which have been more or less, you know, considering the scale of these protests, they've been relatively peaceful, okay? This is not descending into riotous behavior. Yes, there's been some hate crimes, and there's been some, interruptions of services and things like that. But this is not like a George Floyd type situation, okay? These people have a clear purpose to advocate on the part. And even the one in Toronto was incredibly peaceful, just a bunch of guys praying on a street, okay? So these are very seemingly well-organized, well-coordinated protests. But the problem is that it's increasing religious tension. And they're only going to get more intense because now Israel is ramping up its strikes in Gaza. And as these strikes peak right before the invasion, I think we're going to see some images that simply can't be unseen. We're seeing people with their arms and limbs blown apart, children with blood all over them. And that's just, that's on a minute-by-minute basis. We're seeing these videos. So this means that the support is only going to intensify, and we're already at levels never before seen, arguably, for any other war in history, okay, in terms of anti-war sentiment. So what is that going to mean? That means that they're going to be forced to do some shit, okay? Remember, what did I say? I said back when this government shutdown stuff, I said they were going to do something crazy because they needed to win back support for the Ukraine war. Okay, they needed some event. Well, we didn't get it in Ukraine, we got it in Israel. And I'm not saying that it was orchestrated or anything like that. Maybe there's some evidence to show that somebody might have left a back door open somewhere, but I'm not saying that officially, okay? I'm just saying that it's none of this is coincidence. This seems to be a plan which is being enacted, and I could tell by the mannerisms of Lloyd Austin in an interview with a NBC reporter, I think it was today, that he's deadly serious about this is a major escalation in attacks on American military bases that needs to be addressed, meaning that this is probably only the tip of the iceberg and this is the beginning of mission creep, okay? So anyways, Israel today, and this is where things are getting out of control, they attacked, not intentionally, 9 Egyptian soldiers. If you ask the Egyptian people to come out and express their opinion on rejecting the idea of displacement in Sinai and supporting the position of the Egyptian state, the world would see millions on the streets of Egypt. So the Egyptians, as much as they don't want the Gazans, they have some loose ties. I think there's one American military installation there, but it's not that big. They have to be careful, and Israelis, because they could find themselves in a 4-front war. Gaza on one side, the West Bank and Jordan on another, then you have Hezbollah in the north, then you also have Syria in the north as well, And you also might have Egypt, okay? So they're going to find themselves in a very precarious situation that they simply don't have the manpower to deal with. Now, when they make these threats to Hezbollah, that they are going to wipe them off the map and that they're going to go to Iran, are they threatening to nuke Iran? One has to ask this question seriously because they do have a limited amount of options. Now, I just think that this situation has the potential right now, all the hallmarks of something that's about to spiral wildly out of control. You have pretty much every military superpower in some way descending on this place, whether it's the Russians in Syria with their reconnaissance planes in the Mediterranean, with the Chinese who are going to the Persian Gulf, I do believe, with the U.S. who's now going to continue to station some forces in the Persian Gulf, indicating that they definitely are preparing to go to war with Iran. And State Department warnings have been reiterated that in Lebanon that U.S. citizens who wish to depart should leave now due to the unpredictable security situation. There are still commercial flights available, but there is a reduced capacity. So it seems as though they're getting ready to act on Lebanon. They've been striking the airports in Aleppo and Damascus, and it's only a matter of time before you get pushback there by the Russians. So I don't know how the situation is still in a state of relative stability, and in spite of the fact that there's this low-level fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, which I think they had 8 guys lost today. So, I mean, that attrition rate itself is fairly significant. I mean, that's potentially 300 guys a month if they keep going at this rate, and the war hasn't even started yet. So that's really on par with one of the worst years in Iraq for the United States that Hezbollah is enduring, and apparently 40 IDF soldiers have died fighting along that front, as well as 12 Merkava tanks that they've lost and numerous other support vehicles. You have USA, Korea, and Japan conducting joint nuclear drills. First ever type drill, trilateral exercise with a nuclear-capable B-52 Stratofortress bomber. So things are just popping up all over the place. And we are most definitely at a state of DEFCON 3. And I was having a little debate with a OSINT guy on Twitter the other day about how, we shouldn't be overly alarmist about DEFCON 3 and that until we're at DEFCON 2, we shouldn't be concerned. But my concern with that is that DEFCON 2 it's almost too late. It's almost too late for anybody to do anything. Because at DEFCON 2, that means that within hours, you could be at nuclear war. It's during this phase, when you go to DEFCON 3, that is the biggest leap, okay? The biggest leap. Increase in force readiness above the required level for normal readiness. DEFCON 3 is called Roundhouse. And we also have to understand that a lot of people might be comparing this to how things were done during the Cold War. But things have changed since the Cold War. Satellite technology has changed. Guidance systems have changed. Surveillance systems have changed. So the signals might not be the same. So DEFCON 3 is when everybody should be prepping. And I can tell you this, there is a paradox of preparedness in that when everybody starts to prep, when it becomes mainstream, that means it's too late. So long as it's a preoccupation of a fringe group of cynics and pessimists and paranoid individuals, then there's still time, and that it is. But that's the paradox. When everybody starts to say to themselves, when everybody, thinks, it's now socially acceptable, and I don't have to worry about getting weird looks when I talk about preparedness with my friends, it's too late, because that means everybody's doing it, and the SHTF is impending. So the time to prepare is now. You're seeing it unfold all around the world. I can see by the look in Lloyd Austin's eyes that he knows that something big is coming, okay, and that this is just the beginning. I'm going to give you more updates throughout the week. We're going to keep releasing preparedness related videos at the same time. You can watch them. You don't have to watch them. I would encourage you to, because they are important. It's important to continue to get squared away. I'm expecting a lot of volatility in the markets. It's going to be interesting to see how China factors into this Iranian situation, because indeed they do need that oil. The last thing they need is a revolution on their hands, and they'll do anything to prevent that. I'm sure we have attacks on synagogues, people being murdered, people driving through protesters, shooting at protesters. So the chaos is only going to continue. We're seeing now the George Floyd situation, but on a broader scale, and it's mixed and it's tied into a war. And yeah, there was also some attacks on Sevastopol in the Black Sea today. So the situation in Russia is still intensifying. We're going to see how the ATACMS factor into that conflict very soon. If you didn't see my video on firearms today, make sure that you go and check it out, because guys, I have a sneaking suspicion that you're going to need something like this someday for hunting deer. Take care.